So the result in the McGovern-Fraser Commission is that most states are going to decide it's probably a lot easier to move away from the caucus system that we used to have and to have a primary. That doesn't mean that there aren't states that still have a caucus. There definitely exist, and they're important, and they matter. And even today, it is totally up to the state and the state-led party and the state legislature to decide what you're going to do. So, for example, in Texas Republicans have a primary, but up until this election, Texas Democrats had a primary and a caucus. So they had both in terms of deciding candidates. There's some states that will do the Republican primary on one day and the Democratic primary on another day. I need you to understand that this is a giant mess and so confusing because of what, Chris? Federalism. Because they didn't decide in the Constitution, because they left this whole voting stuff up to the states. So really, states, they have a lot of different ways of trying to make those kind of decisions. Okay, so because most states went to a primary, though, and that's what we have in Texas, I want to show you what that looks like first. A primary is simply an election. Okay, in that very first column on your graphic organizer at the top, I write somehow I want you to write really big the word delegate. Okay, the goal of a primary election is to get delegates. And a delegate is a person that is going to go to the national convention and support you. Once you get a maximum number of delegates, you win. So primaries determine delegates. Who is a delegate? You and I. It's like what we saw in that video clip that we just saw from 1972. It's people that are chosen to go to the convention to represent you. And I can't tell you, there's not an exact methodology for how a person gets to be a delegate. It just depends. It depends on the party in your state. Depends on how active they are, how many people do they need. I mean, you're not going to walk in and then go, oh, you want to go to the national convention? I mean, that's like a reward for people who have been working hard and doing stuff, but it's not anymore about donorship and things like that, okay? So there are two kinds of primaries. In Texas, we have an open primary. Jordan, did you pick up on that from the reading? Good. Okay, so in an open primary like we have in Texas, you do not choose a political party when you register. So if I were to pull up my voter registration card and show it to you, it just says I'm registered. So next March, well, not next March, but March 1st, when I go to vote, I'll walk in, I'll show them my driver's license, and they'll say, Shannon, do you want to vote Republican or Democrat? And then I'll say, and then they will give me a little computer card, and I'll walk over to a screen, and I'll put the computer card in, and the ballot that's going to pop up on my computer screen is only going to have offices of that party. The only difference in a closed primary system is that you have to have predetermined. So when you register, you said, I'm Republican or I'm Democrat. Open does not mean you get to vote in both. It means on election day you have to decide. And then in the primary 2 years later, you can vote in a different one. And then the primary 2 years later, you can vote in a different one. Okay. Michael. Other Michael. If you live in a closed primary state, who doesn't get to vote? You do know. So if in a closed primary state I have to choose to be Republican or Democrat, who would not get to vote if you have a closed primary? How could you not be Republican or Democrat? There you go. So in closed primary states, independents are marginalized because they don't get to participate in the primary, okay? Now, can you think of a way, Nikita, can you think of a way that you could use the primary to your, sleuthy advantage? Not just choose a candidate you like, but what else could you do? You seem sleuthy. I bet you could do it.
You could pick the other party. You could pick the other party and then pick the candidate you think would lose.
Could I do that? So if I really, really think that I want the Republican Party to win, and I think the Republicans have a better chance of beating Bernie Sanders, then I would go and I could say I want to vote in the Democratic primary and I can vote for Sanders instead. I know that. I want you to ask around adults and see how many people have done that. It does happen, especially when one party has a clear winner already. There's a lot of times that I voted in the primary in Texas in March, and we already knew who the party was going to pick, so I was like, well, what's the point? Okay. So I'll show you what your ballots are going to look like. Um, so which one is this? Republican. Okay. So if you walk in, March, do any of you get to vote in the primary in March?
I could, but I'm not going to.
Aaliyah, yay! Okay. So Aaliyah, if you walk in there and they say, congratulations, you're gonna get a little I voted sticker. This is what your Republican Party ballot looks like. Now remember, we vote on computer screens here, so it won't actually look like this, but these are what your options will be. So every one of these people will be on your ballot for president, even though Lindsey Graham has already dropped out of the race.
Rand Paul.
Elizabeth Gray, I don't even know who that is. Rick Santorum has dropped out. Rand Paul has dropped out. Mike Huckabee has dropped out. But because they had already met the requirements, they're still going to be on your ballot.
Wait,
So
could they drop out and still win the general election?
Not the general, but they could still get votes. Like if Aaliyah goes, I don't care, Lindsey Graham, I want you to win.
What
Then
if everyone did that though? Would that person have to be the president then?
I mean, they could resign.
no, this doesn't make them president. This makes them a party's choice.
Oh.
I know, but like if
But
they
then they'd have to
won the
be-
party's
party
choice and then
nomination.
everyone voted for them in the general election anyway.
Well, they won't be on the general election ballot
They
though
must have
until
dropped out.
until it happened at the national convention. Yeah.
Okay.
But regardless, okay, so she's going to do that. And then she's going to go and say, okay, all four of these people are running for House of Representatives. Sam Johnson is the incumbent. What does that mean, Emily?
The person that already is in.
And they list the incumbent first. So he's more likely to get the vote because somebody's going to go, I don't know who these people are. I saw Sam Johnson's name on the sign, so I'm going to vote for him. And then, you think I'm kidding.
I feel that
Just walk
so
up.
much.
Yeah,
Just voting for president.
and if you look then, it's the same. So all of these people are Republican nominees for Railroad Commissioner. We have 2 for Supreme Court, 4 for Court of Criminal Appeals. So all of these offices. Plus, then, there's also going to be these Republican ballot propositions. This is not a referendum. This is not like you're voting on a law. This is so they can get perspectives of people who identify as Republican when they're working to try to formulate a platform. So they can say, okay, these are what people who said they voted in our primary, this is what they care about. If you get the Democratic ballot, it will have different issues on it. Like, they won't necessarily be the same. And I will tell you, the Democratic ballot is shorter because there aren't as many Democrats here that are running for all these judicial positions because they're less likely to win because we're such a Republican district. Mike?
Okay, so I registered to vote. You checked that online for me and everything?
Yes, we did.
Do I need to, someone texted me something about registering to vote in the primaries? You don't have to do that if
No,
you're already
you're registered.
registered.
You're good.
Okay, and you have to do that every year, right?
No. Once you're registered, you're registered. You don't have to re-register. They send you a new voter registration card. You only have to re-register if you move.
Okay.
Emily?
So I'm not gonna be old enough to vote to like register for primaries. Can I still vote for the
You bet. As long as you'll be 18 on the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November, you may vote.
Okay.
And I hope you will.
Tuesday after the first Monday.
Okay?
So it can't be on November 1st.
Nope.
No, November 8th.
Okay?
Maybe November 2nd.
Okay. That's a primary.
That's not a Tuesday.
So what is give me one word to tell me what a primary is, you guys.
What? Intro.
Well, it's an inter-party competition, but what kind of competition is it?
Election.
It's an election. That's all it is, you guys. And if you vote on primary day, like if you go on March 1st, the polls will be open from 7 in the morning to 7 at night. You'll walk in, you vote, you walk out. You hardly even have to talk to anybody, okay? If you live in a state that has a caucus, it's going to look really different. So I'm going to show you a video clip. This is from the Iowa caucus. Iowa caucus gets a lot of attention because the Iowa caucus is always first. That does not mean that every caucus looks exactly like this. This is simply an example of a caucus, okay? But you're going to laugh.
Did Hillary interview Hillary?
This is an old one.
So,
Whoa, wait.
What happens when they
What's this?
It's an ad.
Okay, I was like,
Yeah, that's
what
the
happened?
old one.
Okay.
That can't be an old one.
No, he can't. No, Trevor, stop it.
By now, everyone knows that in a presidential year, Iowans cast the first votes that count. But few outside the state have a handle on how this quirky and complicated system works, except our senior political correspondent, Jeff Greenfield, who knows it well and will explain it to us all.
Well, Katie, this campaign night tomorrow will be the first test of the presidential campaign. But what happens here is no delegates are selected to the national conventions. Instead, this is a popularity contest, in effect, and the 2 parties do it in radically different ways. Both parties hold caucuses in each of Iowa's 1,781 precincts. They might be in a school, a church, a library, even a home. But that's where the similarity ends.
She's going to lead our nation with conservative principles. I'm excited to support her.
The Republican process is simple, as this caucus training video shows. You show up at 7 p.m., declare you are a registered Republican. If not, you can register right then and there. And after short speeches by candidates' backers,
it's just a blank sheet of paper. You simply write down the name, and that's collected, and you're done.
a secret ballot, a straight-up count. The candidate with the most votes wins, a model of simplicity. But the Democrats, not so much.
The registration line is nearing an end.
Democrats show up at 6:30. The doors close at 7. And then, instead of a secret ballot, caucus goers publicly declare their choices by moving into different corners of the room, into presidential preference groups.
And he's got so much enthusiasm out there that it's unbelievable.
There shouldn't even be any more.
As this 2004 caucus in a dare shows, you have to stand up in front of perhaps your boss or spouse and declare your choice. Doesn't that raise the possibility of intimidation?
It is neighbors talking to neighbors about who they're selecting for their nominee. It is free and it is open and you are there of your own volition.
A head count is taken, and, critically, a candidate must achieve a certain level of support, usually 15%, to achieve viability. So if there are 50 people in the room, you must have at least 8 in your corner to be viable. You might think of this as a first step in an elimination round. If your candidate is declared not viable, you can either go home or realign, joining up with a candidate who has survived by moving into another corner of the room.
You know what?
What happens then is something between earnest debate and old-fashioned horse trading, as in 2004 when backers of John Kerry and John Edwards argued and pleaded with backers of Howard Dean to join up with them.
So I think we can sway the Dean people over to the Kerry.
Once realignment is done, a final head count is made, and each precinct awards delegates not to the national conventions, but to the Iowa Democratic County Conventions. Drake University professor Dennis Goldford does his best to explain.
The number of the people in the preference group times the number of delegates that precinct sends to the county convention, divided by the total number of caucus participants in that precinct.
Right. What really matters, what everybody will be talking about, of course, is the final statewide percentages for Clinton, Edwards, Obamas, and all the other Democrats.
All right. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, about the piece here, okay. I don't know whether I vote Republican or Democrat until after the primaries, because it's gonna depend who the candidates are, because I can go either way on them, so, but I can only pick one side to vote for in the primaries. I can
Yes.
only pick to vote
Right.
on the Democrat ballot.
So you have just illustrated a very good reason, or
To evolve
that
political
no,
parties.
that many moderate or independents don't pay attention during the primary and the caucus season, because they say it doesn't really matter. I only care once we have the candidates who would actually win. And so like that's kind of what's happening. If you see who is it that went to the caucus in Iowa? Who is it that voted last night in the New Hampshire primary? Those are people that are committed to the party's choice. So very often we find that in those elections there are people that are more ideological. There are people that are more, if you look at the support that Bernie Sanders has, he's a real left-leaning Democrat, right? I'm not sure that a lot of moderate people are going to support him, though, again, like I said, never going to say never, right? Donald Trump says a lot of things that are real extreme and polarizing, but then he also has a lot of real moderate opinions. So in many ways, he's not even saying what Republicans really think, but he's obviously appealing to some segment of the population that identifies themselves as Republican. But in New Hampshire, they have an open primary, and they have the registration requirement is you show up on the day and register. Whereas remember here, you have to register 30 days prior. So they were really getting out the vote, and there's people that showed up yesterday, had never voted, registered to vote, and walked in and voted for